The courthouse waiting room smelled of old wood and anxiety. Tevin Watson sat with his hands clasped between his knees, staring at the scuffed linoleum floor as if it held answers he desperately needed. Beside him, separated by an empty chair that felt like a canyon, sat Kira Mahoney. Her eyes were red-rimmed, tissues clutched in one hand, the other absently twisting the modest engagement ring on her finger, a ring that now felt more like a question mark than a promise. 4 years. 4 years of doubt, accusations, and a love that refused to die despite being poisoned slowly by suspicion. 4 years of watching their son Kevin look up at his father with hopeful eyes, only to see Tevin turn away, unable to meet that innocent gaze without wondering whose child he really was. In the corner, Tevin's mother, Yolanda Watson, sat ramrod straight, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. She had raised her son to be a good man, to take responsibility, to honor his commitments. But she had also raised him to be nobody's fool. The rumors that had reached her ears over the years had planted their own seeds of doubt, and now even she, who had bounced Kevin on her knee and bought him birthday presents, questioned whether this child carried her son's blood. Watson versus Mahoney, the bailiff called, his voice cutting through the thick silence. They rose as one, a fractured family held together by legal summons rather than love. As they filed into the courtroom, Kira caught Tevin's eye. For a moment, she saw the boy she had known since childhood, the one who had walked her home from school, who had kissed her for the first time behind the community center, who had promised her forever under a sky full of stars. But that moment passed, and his face hardened again into the mask of betrayal he had worn for so long. Judge Lauren Lake sat elevated behind her bench, a woman who had presided over hundreds of paternity cases and had learned to see through lies, desperation, and the complex mess that people made of their lives. She studied the couple before her with practiced eyes, noting the body language, the distance between them, the way Kira kept glancing at Tevin while he stared straight ahead. "This is the case of Watson versus Mahoney," Judge Lake began, her voice carrying the weight of authority tempered with compassion. "Mr. Watson, you are in court to prove that you are not the biological father of the defendant's 4-year-old son, Kevin. You say that while you were away, Miss Mahoney was having sexual relationships with 2 different men, and either of them could be the father. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." Tevin's voice was firm, but those who knew him well could hear the tremor underneath, the sound of a man who desperately wanted to be wrong. Judge Lake turned to Kira. "Ms. Mahoney, you say you are 99.999% sure that Mr. Watson is the father and deny his accusations of infidelity. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." Kira's voice cracked, and she pressed a tissue to her eyes. The weight of 4 years crashed down on her shoulders. 4 years of being called a liar, a cheat, of watching the man she loved pull away from their son. 4 years of solo parenting while living under the same roof as the person who should have been her partner. "Mr. Watson, you say today's results will determine the future of your relationship." Tevin took a deep breath. His next words felt like jumping off a cliff. "Yes, Your Honor, it will. I've known her since we were kids. We need these results because, we're engaged and I would like to marry her. And I really hope this is my son." The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Here was a man torn between love and doubt, between the family he wanted and the betrayal he believed he had suffered. "And you say the relationship's on the line," Judge Lake pressed, "meaning if the results don't turn out the way you would like, the relationship, the marriage, everything, It's out the window, Your Honor. It's over with. The finality in Tevin's voice made Kira sob quietly. Really? Judge Lake's eyebrows rose. Yes, ma'am. Judge Lake turned her attention to Kira, her expression softening. Miss Mahoney, how is this paternity doubt affecting your child? Kira's composure crumbled. The tears came freely now, carrying 4 years of watching her baby boy suffer for adult mistakes and misunderstandings. Hard, he takes it hard. He looks up to him a lot. Sometimes he gets real short-tempered with him, and he just he'll sit by him and he'll move away, and it's hard as a mother to see that. She could picture Kevin's face so clearly, the way his eyes lit up when Tevin came home, the way he would run to him with arms outstretched, only to be met with a cold shoulder or a dismissive pat on the head. She saw the confusion that clouded her son's features, the way a 4-year-old tried to process rejection from the only father he had ever known. And Kevin's 4? Judge Lake asked gently. So he understands this rejection. Yeah, it takes him really hard. He's sheltered now. Kira's voice was barely a whisper. Every word felt like an admission of failure, though she had done nothing wrong. She had been faithful. She had told the truth. But the truth hadn't been enough to save her family from tearing apart. Judge Lake turned back to Tevin, her expression stern. And so, Mr. Watson, you are rejecting the child? Yes, Your Honor. I'm not the dad, that's why. The words came out defensive, angry. When I was away, when I came back, she was cheating, and she has a bad reputation of being basically, as I'm going to say it, the neighborhood hoe. The audience gasped. Kira flinched, as if she'd been slapped. Judge Lake held up a hand. Okay, we're going to try to use respectful language, but let's say she had a reputation of being very promiscuous. Yes, Your Honor. And so, you were away, and you came home. What did you find when you came home? Tevin's jaw clenched. The memory still burned. He had been gone for months, working out of state, trying to build a better future for them. He had called every day, sent money when he could, dreamed of coming home to Kira's arms. Instead, he had walked into a nightmare. She had 2 men staying with her, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. They were showering her with gifts, taking care of her. Now, me as a man, personally, I'm not going to do that for no woman unless... Being a man, though, you shouldn't have left me, Kira interjected, her voice rising. The accusation had been building for 4 years, and it burst out now like a dam breaking. I never left, Tevin shot back. Judge Lake raised her hand again. Ms. Mahoney, did you have 2 men living with you? Kira nodded, wiping her eyes. The shame of it still burned, even though she knew she had done what she needed to survive. Yes, ma'am. I had no job. I had nothing to fend for myself. They were close family friends, and they just wanted to help me. No, they weren't, Tevin muttered. I agreed to let them stay, and if I needed some toilet paper or anything, they would help provide it. Judge Lake leaned forward. And so, were you providing them with anything besides a place to stay? A bedroom. That was it. I would not... Your Honor, Tevin interrupted, shaking his head vigorously. They were not close family friends. That is not true. I've known them since I was 13, Kira protested. That ain't no family friend. The argument was an old one, worn smooth by repetition, but no less painful for it. They had had this fight 100 times, in their bedroom, in the kitchen, in hushed whispers, so Kevin wouldn't hear. But Kevin always heard. Children always do. Judge Lake cut through the bickering. Mr. Watson, did you ever ask these men if they were sleeping with Ms. Mahoney. Yes, Your Honor. You did? And what was his response? He said yes. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Kira shook her head frantically. There's been many people in our life trying to split us up. We have a problem where people want to see us fail. So he said he was having sex with Ms. Mahoney? Judge Lake asked Tevin. Yes, and when I confronted her about it, she denied it, multiple times, and when I asked if we could all sit down together and talk about it in front of this person, she never wanted to do that. She stalled out. That's not true, Kira cried. Our family is on the line, and I just hope we can… So why would that other guy say he's the father? Judge Lake interrupted. Tevin leaned forward, his voice bitter. He says, that's my son. He says, there's a difference between a father and a dad. He's the one talking about that's his kid, that he provided for him. Okay, I was away. I couldn't, Tevin said, his voice rising. When I called you and he was hungry, what could I do? I was away. There was nothing I could do. Like I said, there's a difference between being a father. Kira started. So, if he was my kid, why bring other men around my kid? Tevin's voice cracked with pain and anger. This was the heart of it, the wound that wouldn't heal, the image of another man playing father to his son, or worse, to a son that wasn't even his. Judge Lake held up a hand. Mr. Watson, I do want to make a clarification. Did he say he was the biological father, or did this man say he was stepping up to be a father? He said, that was his kid, Your Honor. He said, that was his kid, and that he's in love with her, and that's his girl. He always says that. Even to this day, he says that. Kira nodded reluctantly. That is true. He has said he loves me. But like I've said, I cannot control somebody else's feelings. And as long as I'm doing what I'm supposed to do as a woman to my family, there is no reason. But Ms. Mahoney, Judge Lake pressed, why would a guy say to you that you were having sex with him if you weren't? Kira's answer came through tears. Because he knows that if he were to tell him that, Tevin's going to walk out and he's going to leave me. And that's what happened. So you're saying he just kept saying that to break you apart? Yes, Your Honor. And I'll be crying, upset, and I don't want that. I don't want anybody else with Tevin. The pain in her voice was raw, genuine. But Tevin had heard her cry before, had seen her tears, and they no longer moved him the way they once had. Doubt was a poison that killed slowly, and he had been dying for 4 years. It was basically crazy, Tevin said, his voice taking on a harder edge. Her and her friend fell out, and the friend called me one day and was like, I want to tell you everything. And she basically told me everything. How Kira was sleeping with multiple men, plus the 2 staying with her. How men were crawling through the window late at night. But it's my house, Kira protested. Why would I have somebody crawl through a window? Judge Lake studied Tevin carefully. And this is what her former friend told you? Yes, Your Honor. The same friend that… Kira started. Because I just found out they had sexual intercourse under a bridge, Kira said, her voice suddenly sharp. The betrayal was mutual, it seemed. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Lake's expression shifted. Did you have sex with this friend, Mr. Watson? Tevin shifted uncomfortably. Don't lie, Kira added. No, Your Honor. No, I did not. Not sex. What did she do? Judge Lake asked. Be honest, Kira pleaded, because this is our chance to clear the water and make our family either complete or separate. Tevin took a breath. I did not have sexual relations with that woman in any kind. The courtroom erupted in laughter at the familiar phrase. Even Judge Lake smiled wryly. We've heard that before, right? The judge said. Was there sexual contact? Yes, Your Honor. The admission hung in the air. Kira looked away, fresh tears streaming down her face. So he had been with her best friend, the woman she had trusted with everything, who had known all her secrets, who had then weaponized that intimacy to destroy her relationship. So how can you not expect this woman to do the same thing? Judge Lake asked pointedly. Because that was her best friend, Tevin said. That was her ride or die. They were together every day. Who doesn't tell their best friend secrets? You felt she gave you the inside scoop, Judge Lake asked. Yes, Your Honor. And then she wanted to get close to you, but she gave you a scoop, all right, Judge Lake said knowingly. The psychology of it was clear to everyone in the courtroom. A jealous friend, a vulnerable man, whispered secrets that may or may not have been true. It was a tale as old as time. So, when you found out Ms. Mahoney was pregnant, what happened then? Judge Lake asked. Kira spoke up, her voice steadier now. I found out I was pregnant, and it was kind of iffy at first. But he switched and was like, no, you had these men here. I know you were sleeping with them. And that's around the time I found out what had happened between him and my best friend. He just was really upset and told me I couldn't name him a junior. Her voice broke. Kevin, that's really close, you know. And he said I'd been sleeping with them, and they're his kids. The memory of that time washed over Kira like a wave. She had been so excited when she saw those two pink lines. She had imagined Tevin's face, imagined him picking her up and spinning her around, imagined them shopping for baby clothes together. Instead, she had gotten accusations and rejection. She had spent her pregnancy alone, even with Tevin in the same house. She had given birth with only her mother by her side because Tevin refused to come to the hospital, refused to risk getting attached to a child he believed wasn't his. So, you took a DNA test? Judge Lake asked. Yes, ma'am. I was on government assistance, and child support made me comply. They asked me who the father was. I told them it was Tevin, and he ran from all the appointments. Then finally they found him and had him go up there and take the DNA. What did the DNA test say? 99.9%. That Mr. Watson was Kevin's biological father, and the state put him on the birth certificate. Judge Lake leaned forward. Did you bring that test result with you? No, I didn't, but I even posted it on Facebook. Mr. Watson, why don't you believe those results? Tevin's voice was firm. First of all, Your Honor, her friend forged papers. When she walked up showing me these papers, I didn't see no government stamp on it. And when I read it, it said something like 99% of the black population, in America. That was my response. And that DNA test took about 7 or 8 months just to get here. There was no explanation for that. They couldn't find him, Kira interjected, to get his DNA, and they already had ours. So you believe she forged these results? Judge Lake asked Tevin. Yes, ma'am. Judge Lake's expression became serious. When this court contacted your home state, because we do our own investigation as well, we were told that it takes about 2 weeks to 1 month to get results. So, Ms. Mahoney, why would it take 7 months to get these results? Kira looked genuinely confused. I don't know why, Your Honor. We were together when they showed up. If you're confident, why wouldn't you take a sealed envelope to Mr. Watson and say, this is the paperwork? Judge Lake pressed. Your Honor, we've been through so much and spent so much in our life. I never expected him to think of me that low. I would never do that. That's low of a person. So you never thought he would question paternity? They're documented government papers. When your friend's forging papers, what do you want me to do? Tevin interjected. My friend, she forged DNA documents before, when we were younger, and it looked real. So I understand the fact that it would be in my mind as well. The layers of deception, real and imagined, had built up over the years like sediment, burying the truth under so much doubt that finding it again seemed impossible. Judge Lake straightened in her seat. Mr. Watson, I understand this is a little too close to home for you. You have a witness. I'd like to hear from her. Yolanda Watson stood, her movements measured and dignified. As she made her way to the witness stand, Kira watched her with trepidation. Yolanda had once been like a second mother to her. They had cooked together, laughed together, planned Tevin and Kira's future together, but that had been before the accusations, before the doubt, before the family had fractured into opposing camps. State your name for the record. Yolanda Watson. Miss Watson, you are what relation to Mr. Watson? Tevin's mother. So, ma'am, you've heard the testimony that we have presented thus far. What can you tell us about this situation? Yolanda took a deep breath. Her voice, when it came, was heavy with conflicted emotions. Well, I heard the rumors when they first came about. I'm confused about what all has been said and what's all going on. Did you ever hear this information about papers being forged? Yes, ma'am. DNA papers. You've heard that. Yes, ma'am. Kira interjected. She knew her too. The former best friend had poisoned multiple relationships, it seemed. Yes, ma'am, and I did not care for her, Yolanda confirmed. Judge Lake asked the crucial question. Do you believe that biologically Kevin is your grandson? Yolanda's face crumpled slightly. The admission clearly pained her. I am now questioning more and more. That's never been in my heart before, and it is now. And it's really bothering me. The words hit Kira like physical blows. Even Kevin's grandmother now doubted him. How must that feel for a little boy who had done nothing wrong except be born into a family torn apart by suspicion? Thank you so much for your testimony, ma'am, Judge Lake said gently. As Yolanda returned to her seat, Judge Lake turned back to Kira. Miss Mahoney, you say this relationship is on the line now. Everything is riding on these results. Yes, Your Honor, I want to marry him, and I want to have a future. I want our son to be happy. But we fight all the time over this, and he loves his dad, and I know Tevin loves him. For 4 years, this has been hanging over our heads. Anything. We can be mad about our sandwich being cold, and we're going to end up fighting about this. Judge Lake nodded slowly. There's a lot of bad water under your bridge. Yes, Your Honor. We were young. We've done a lot of things to each other that we're not proud of. But I want it to be over with now. I want to move on. I want the answers. There's no way to clear the water under the bridge unless you tell the truth, Judge Lake said seriously. Is there something you have not said? Is there another man that could potentially be Kevin's biological father? No, ma'am. Are there any other men? No, ma'am. We have broken up, and I've had other relationships with men, but never around when I got pregnant. Tevin scoffed audibly. Not true. How close in proximity to Kevin's conception did you have relationships with other men? Judge Lake asked. It was after, Your Honor. After he was born, and he was already probably about 2 years old. Get out of here, man, Tevin muttered. I'm not going to argue, Kira said, her voice breaking again. You're right. I don't want to argue. We've done 4 years of arguing. I just want to know where to go from here. What to do. Our family is on the line. Judge Lake studied Tevin carefully. Mr. Watson, do you want to make this work if Kevin is your biological child? Yes, Your Honor. Of course I love this woman. And if he's not? The pause that followed seemed to stretch into eternity. Finally, Tevin spoke, his voice hollow. I don't know. Everything's just… Be honest, Kira whispered. You're gonna leave. Yeah, I'm gonna leave. We'll never see you again. Kira's face crumpled. It's like we never had anything. You can't just walk out on somebody like that. The pain in the courtroom was palpable. Here was a family on the precipice, held together by the thinnest thread, waiting for science to tell them whether they had a future or not. Judge Lake's expression was grave. I think there's so much at stake here. We can't wait a moment longer. Jerome, let's get these results. The bailiff stepped forward, carrying an envelope that contained the power to build or destroy lives. The courtroom fell absolutely silent. Kira gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Tevin stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight it must have hurt. Yolanda closed her eyes briefly, perhaps praying. Judge Lake opened the envelope with practiced ease, but even she seemed to move more slowly than usual, understanding the weight of this moment. She pulled out the paper, scanned it quickly, and then looked up at the couple before her. These results were prepared by DNA Diagnostics, and they read as follows. Time seemed to stop. Kira held her breath. Tevin's hands gripped his knees. In the case of Watson versus Mahoney, when it comes to 4-year-old Kevin Watson, it has been determined by this court. Mr. Watson, you are the father. The courtroom erupted in cheers and applause. Kira's sob of relief was visceral, a sound that came from somewhere deep in her soul. She turned to Tevin, who sat frozen in his seat, processing the information that had just shattered 4 years of certainty. See, Kira cried, reaching for him. I love you. I love you so much. I'm sorry, baby. Tevin turned to her, and for the first time in years, the wall between them crumbled. I love you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I love you so much. I'm sorry, baby. They embraced, and it was as if 4 years of pain began to drain away in that moment. Not all of it, healing would take time, but enough that they could breathe again, could see each other clearly instead of through the fog of suspicion. Yolanda stood and approached them, tears streaming down her face. Come here, she said, pulling them both into her arms. I love you guys. When they finally separated, Kira wiped her eyes and looked at Tevin with a tremulous smile. Can we go home and get married now? Tevin laughed, a real laugh that the courtroom hadn't heard from him all day. Yes, we can. The audience cheered again, but Judge Lake raised her hand, her expression serious, despite the joy in the room. Listen, she said firmly, it can be better, but you have to do the work. That's why we're here, Kira said quickly. Right. I was just about to say, Miss Mahoney, you're so correct. This was the first step. It took you 4 years to get here. 4 years to just get clarity from a situation that's been hanging over your heads and destroying your lives. It's been so hard. Yes, Your Honor. And not just your lives. Kevin's life. The mention of their son sobered them both. Tevin nodded. I'm going to make that way better. I'm going to step up. Swear to God. And I believe him, Yolanda added. That's why I wanted to be here too. Judge Lake leaned forward, her voice gentle but insistent. But listen, what you have to understand is a child knows when they're being rejected. So now, we don't know what Kevin is feeling inside. You all have the obligation now to do the work necessary to not just repair your relationship, but to help repair the damage that has been done to him. Yes, Your Honor, Kira said softly, fresh tears forming. We have counseling and resources for you that are going to help you just get on the right path to a better future. For yourselves and for Kevin. I know you love him. I can see that. So much, Kira whispered. Now you just have to do what you have to do to create the foundation from which he can launch and soar. All right? They both nodded, holding hands now, united in purpose for the first time in years. I wish you all the very best, Judge Lake said, with a warm smile. Court is adjourned. As the gavel fell, Tevin and Kira stood together, arms around each other. Outside the courtroom, Kevin waited with Kira's mother, playing with toy cars and unaware that his world had just shifted on its axis. Soon, his father, his real father, confirmed and certain, would walk through that door and pick him up without hesitation, without that shadow of doubt that had always hung between them. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. 4 years of damage couldn't be undone in a day. Tevin would have to learn to trust again, to silence the voices of doubt that had become so familiar. Kira would have to forgive the rejection, the accusations, the pain of being called a liar when she had told the truth all along. Kevin would need patience, consistency, and unconditional love as he learned that his father's coldness hadn't been his fault. But they had something now that they hadn't had in 4 years. Certainty. The truth, scientifically proven and undeniable. Kevin was Tevin's son. They were a family, not by assumption or hope, but by fact. As they walked out of the courtroom together, hands clasped, heading toward the little boy who waited for them, they carried that certainty like a torch in the darkness. It wasn't everything they needed, but it was a start. And sometimes, a start is all a family needs to begin again.